Greetings, comrades and friends. It's been a long time since I made a video in English, and now I'm out to demolish a myth which has found wide circulation among white supremacist Nazis and Islamophobes. We are talking about a myth, the myth according to which North Africans enslaved millions of white Europeans Christians. So therefore maybe the European conquest and colonization of North Africa wasn't such a bad thing after all. Of course, it's rather easy to brush away the details, and it takes a little it takes quite a little to turn these North Africans into black Africans. Therefore make black Africans scapegoats for enslaving millions of white European Christians. So perhaps the Atlantic, the gruesome trade in black lives, wasn't such a bad thing after all either, right? Perhaps the trade in black slaves, the European trade of black slaves, wasn't such a bad thing either. I will not pretend that North African Arabs were innocent 100%. But it's not possible to make a North African Arab into a black African, sub-Saharan African. Black Africans and North Africans are different peoples. They are not at all one and the same. But today, I will tell you that history, factual history, actually makes many North African Arabs into white Europeans themselves. So perhaps it's worth looking into this. It was not just the North African Arabs who enslaved European Christians. It was white Europeans themselves, white Europeans who converted to Islam, but despite giving up their Christian faith, they were white Christians. That's not to deny the horrors of the Barbary slave trade. Barbary, because the North African coast was known as Barbaria, the Barbary coast. That's not to deny the horrors of the Barbary slave trade. But it was a horror in which black Africans had no part whatsoever. North African Arabs had a part that was lower than what is commonly attributed to them, and white Europeans were the main culprits. That's right. The Barbary slave trade was a horror in which white European renegades, white European converts to Islam, were actually the main culprits. Let's start with 16th century. We know that in the first half of the 16th centuries, the leaders of the Barbary pirates were two white European brothers, the Barbarossa brothers, namely Hayreddin and Arouj. Do you think that it was for nothing? Do you think it was for nothing that Hayreddin was called Barbarossa? He really had a red beard. His beard was red. This man was white. He was as white as any white European from a Nazi textbook. As white as a white European from a Nazi textbook. His nickname was Barbarossa. His beard was red, his skin was white. It was the white fellow. Okay? Fast forward to the 17th century. A 17th century which saw the enslavement, the 17th century alone, saw the enslavement of 1 million white Europeans by a pirate oligarchy which was mainly white European itself. I'm using this excellent book, Pirates of Barbary, by Adrian Tinniswood, Pirates of Barbary. That's the book which I use. Fast forward to the 17th century. A list of 35 corsair captains who owned war galleys in Algiers in the 1580s. We are still talking about 16th century, about the later half. Included just 10 Turks. Only 10 Turks owned warships intent on enslaving white Europeans. But there were also 6 Genoese Italians, 3 Greeks, 2 Venetians, 2 Spaniards, 2 Albanians, 1 from Naples, Sicily, Calabria, 1 apiece from Naples, Sicily, Calabria, France, Hungary, and Corsica. And behold, 1 Jew. Now, even the admiral of the Algerian fleet himself, the admiral, was an Italian renegade. Now, I hope there is no doubt whatsoever that Italians belong to the white race, despite some of them being rather dark. But in general, Italians belong to the white race. Now, before his capture and conversion to Islam, the treasurer to the Pasha of Algiers in the 1580s, now an eunuch named Hassan Aga, had been a Bristol merchant's son named Rowley. Now wait for the punchline. From 1649 to 1672, the roles of both Pasha and Dey of Tripoli were occupied by a Greek renegade. Later on in the 17th century, after the dual role was divided into separate posts again, the Dey was a Venetian and the Pasha an Albanian. Now I hope there is no doubt whatsoever that Venetians and Albanians belong to the white race. Fast forward to the early 17th century. The year 1610 saw the conversion to Islam of a white Englishman converted to Islam in 1610. His name was Ward, John Ward. And it was in response to this outrage that a poem from 1612 was directed at John Ward by an English satirist named Samuel Rowlands. Here's the poem. The wicked lamp of only sin and shame, renouncing Christian faith and Christian name, a villain worse than he that Christ betrayed, which implies that Ward was actually worse than Judas himself. The poem ends with a prediction. Receive this warning from thy native land. God's fearful judgments with villain are at hand. Devils attend, hellfire is prepared, perpetual flames is reprobate, is reward. Now, fast forward to the year 1627, when a Dutch convert to Islam, a white-skinned Dutch, who went by the name Murad, formerly known as Jan Jansson of Haarlem, set out on a bold slave-taking raid to Iceland. Over the course of 5,000 miles, this fleet carrying a mixture of Christians and Muslims, Franks and Turks, but led by the white European renegade, arrived off the Icelandic coast and immediately began raiding small settlements and spreading terror and confusion. The fleet returned with no less than 400 Icelanders, whom they sold on the slave market in Algiers. It's worth reminding that the Icelandic liturgy still includes a prayer beseeching God for protection against the terror of Turks. So it's safe to say that the theory that North Africans, let alone black Africans, the theory that North Africans enslaved Christians on a huge scale, North African Arabs enslaved Christians on a huge scale, doesn't seem to hold water. The truth is much more nuanced and mixed. The truth is that white Europeans renegades, white European converts to Islam, collaborated with the North African Arabs in enslaving 1 million white Europeans in the 17th century alone. And black Africans appear to have had no part in it whatsoever. So it was a business. It was the Barbary slave trade. It was a business of white Europeans renegades and North African Arabs, but mainly led a business in which it was the white European renegades who called the shots, who had the lead. Thank you, comrades. As usual, thanks for watching, and we'll meet soon again.